Through you, Mr. President, yes, we have put together a pretty extensive utilization plan for the project, which sets goals and an outreach effort to increase the probability of participation by disadvantaged minority and women business enterprises. And Executive Order 15A is incorporated in that utilization plan.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item carries. Main motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion, Mr. Haney?
On the main motion, Mr. President, two questions. One, is my understanding correct that this money is only going to be used for the Monroe Community College portion of the project?
Through you, Mr. President, that's correct. The county share will be for the college capital.
Thank you. Second, Mr. President, at the committee, when we got into the whole issue about whether we had a valid capital fund or not, I was in the midst of offering an amendment to this introduction, and I'd like to offer that amendment now.
Point of order. I just wanted to clarify, Mr. President, before we move to the amendment. It wasn't stated who moved and seconded the main motion. Could you just, for the record, state that?
Was moved by Legislator Quattro, second by Legislator Gibson.
Okay, thank you.
This construction project, Mr. President, is, as I understand it, the biggest, in its totality, is the biggest single construction project the county of Monroe has ever undertaken. As such, I think that it's imperative that the county legislature maintain close oversight and monitoring of the project. In accordance with that, I'm concerned about the ending of the last sentence in section 1 of the introductory. While I realize that it's a standard phraseology from most of our undertakings, this is not a standard project, merely due to its size. The language of this, of the legislation, since, as I understand it, the size of the capital project is something like $11 million, by the phraseology at the end of the first section, which says, along with any amendments necessary to complete the project within the total capital fund appropriation, which is, as I said, I believe is about $12 million, we, in effect, could be appropriating and acting upon not just the $2.3 million, but the entire amount of the capital fund. And I think with the uniqueness of this project, that's an inappropriate giveaway of the authority of this legislature. Therefore, Mr. President, I would move to strike the ending words in section 1, so that the action tonight was limited to the $2.3 million, and I would so move.
I'll second that.
Discussion on the amendment? Legislator Dawson.
Actually, Legislator Haney's left out a very important word in the resolution. It actually says complete the interim phase of the project. Legislator Haney's amendment didn't take that into account. His amendment's really not accurate.
Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, Mr. Haney's amendment is accurate because although we're talking about an interim phase, we could, this is an authorization to to contribute as much as the total capital fund appropriation, which I believe at Department of Public Works was indicated to be in the $11 or $12 million range, if I recall correctly. Am I right about that for you, Mr. President?
Through the President, the bond resolutions that have been authorized to engage are approximately $10.6 million.
And what this section 1 talks about is that giving the authority to complete the interim phase of an amount up to that $10.6 million in essence. And I think what Legislator Healy is appropriately pointing out is that we ought to just limit that to the projected cost of the interim phase, which is the $2.3 million. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion? Legislator Clark.
Through you, Mr. President, I intend to vote against the amendment for this very reason. There is no reason, the limitation is built right into the original referral. 2.3 million certainly is the estimate for the interim phase. I think that the phrase as it's originally presented in the referral is reasonable. If, for instance, the expenditure goes over 2.3 million by $15, that would require that the issue come back to the legislature, and it adds a layer of bureaucracy that we don't need. The interim phase of the project is well described. The information that has been available to the Maine and Clinton Group Local Development Corporation has been fastidiously prepared and regularly presented. So I don't see any reason to go ahead with this amendment, so I will be voting no.
Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. President. One question through you to the administration. As it reads now, does this referral give you the ability to spend up to the 10.5 plus 2.3, 12 million, about $12.7 million?
Through you, Mr. President, only on interim phase activities. So beyond that, we can expect.
If you wouldn't mind, would you please, through the President, define interim?
Through you, Mr. President, that covers the design development, which is approximately 70% complete of the design documents, and other administrative and management expenses associated to having enough information sufficient to be able to have a joint development agreement brought to the legislature.
Thank you. And through you to the administration, Mr. President, what would be the total cost that we have incurred so far if we include this $2.3 billion on the Renaissance Square project?
Through the President, that was $2.6 million.
That's all we've spent on the Renaissance Square project? Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Hayden.
Mr. President, to respond to my colleague, Mr. Quattro's concerns, we ran $15 over the 2.3 million. If the 2.3 is considered to be too tight an estimate, I'd certainly be willing to increase by a reasonable amount that estimate. What I don't want to see is the whole $12 million on the table tonight. And that's in effect what we're doing by adopting this with the language.
Legislator Quattro.
Through you, Mr. President, I only intended to illustrate the fact that there didn't need to be an extra level of bureaucracy added to this process, considering the level of transparency that we have seen and the way that the information has been presented to this community and to this legislature, quite frankly, as we've all been invited to participate in the Maine and Clinton Local Development Corporation meetings and receive regular updates. I believe that this is a reasonably prepared estimate. I'm confident in the ability of the team that's been put together by the county executive and the Maine and Clinton Local Development Corporation. So I don't see a need to add this level of bureaucracy, considering the fact that we have such well-developed plan and such a high level of transparency.
Legislator Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in favor to speak in favor of the amendment. This community has waited for this project, has discussed it, waited it, and heard about it